Hi guys, Woody here. I want to bring a guide to my bow build that I'm currently using in Wolcen to push to tier 190. That's the highest tier in the game, and I'm quite close to it. I've pushed up to 170 so far, but I decided to just get out this guide already, and I'm gonna do the rest of the pushing today. And I have absolutely no doubt that it's gonna be pretty much of a cakewalk. This is like one of the probably only builds that can actually do those tiers at some kind of not outrageous clear times, I guess. And most people that are actually playing on the high tiers use bugs and have much higher damage multipliers than they should have, to like, I don't know, 1 or 2 orders of magnitude at least, probably more. So once all this stuff gets fixed, no one will do any damage anymore. But this build is still able to do it. In fact, it's only gonna get stronger once they fix some other bugs, because there's a lot of passives that don't really work, and that would actually increase this damage by a lot. So the build is based around bow skills, and I use poison and bleed to deal damage myself. So I stack a lot of ailments, and other than that I use Mark of Impurity. It has a rune where when the target dies it will spread to other targets, and it has another rune where the targets will explode when they die. And this explosion is very significant, and this is actually like your main DPS in the late game. So for early game, like I initially intended this build to be like a super strong, dot everything up and let it die kind of build, and then have like a really good single target. But the high tiers have really high HP. You have like bosses with over 50 million life, and this build does around, I don't know, 200k, maybe 250k DPS on a single target. So it's not really that great. So we had to figure something out, and I went with this mark, and this is working surprisingly good. So what you want to do is you run into a pack, you mark the smallest HP target, and you group them up, and then you blow them up in one chain reaction, basically. So you want to drag stuff along with you, and then you want to make big pulls, and it's a very cool build, very satisfying to play. It's basically like a mix of an Explosion Pawn Monk with some Natalia and some Marauder Demon Hunter mixed in there. It's really awesome, and it's so much fun to play. And going up the tiers is just like GR 150 solo pushing, so it's really great. And you can really use this explosion effect to your advantage to do lots of damage. In fact, you can even one-shot certain bosses. It always depends on how much trash monsters there are around, and sometimes you get really lucky and do like millions of damage in one go. I actually had like one boss that completely one-shot from like 30 million HP, but of course it's not always that easy. You really have to be careful with your explosions when you pop them, and on the very high tiers, like after 160 or so, it can actually be quite difficult to even pop the first explosion to start a chain reaction. So you have to keep that in mind. You have to be very careful with this, what you're marking, what you're damaging, and you have to make sure that the elites are inside of the pull so that they actually die. You don't really want to DPS the boss for 10 minutes to slowly whittle it down. That does happen. And sometimes you just don't have any monsters left on the map, and there's no ads or anything. But generally, you can kill most bosses in a bunch of minutes, maybe like 1-2 minutes if you have like a decent boss fight. So this is all right, I guess. And just clearing through the map is also quite consistent. It's quite safe. The build is quite tanky, and it works pretty well. So it's not really like the craziest farming so far, but you have to consider this is at highest tiers in the game. You get the best loot here, and as I said, there's not many other builds that can probably even do that at all. So there's only just one thing. Basically, you can do anything with this build, and you're quite safe doing so, but there are regeneration affixes on bosses. And regeneration is actually a big issue after around tier 160 or so. It's very hard to out DPS the regen on some bosses. So it could happen that you actually have to leave a run because you simply can't kill the boss when there's not enough ads. I didn't have that happen to me yet, but I came really close to that, like once or twice, simply because I had a boss with like 70 million life, and he was regenerating almost faster than I could damage him. So I had to get lucky with some explosions and eventually killed him. But this is just something. Other than that, you can probably do any content in this game, and it's really good. So let's go over the details of this build. As I mentioned the skills already. So we have the core of the build is the Mark of Impurity. I use these runes. It's more vulnerable, more vulnerable, more vulnerable. And then we have the explosion rune, and we have the spread. And yeah, basically like this, it's like I think 40% DPS multiplier on a single target, or just like the increased damage taken. So this is very nice. And on top of that, you have these explosions. And the explosion, it does quite a significant amount of damage. It's like 15% or so, I don't know exactly, of the monster's HP. So this is very, very strong, of course, when you have like lots of monsters stacked up. And we can actually double up on this explosion, because there's a passive node called which time cannot heal. And it says when you hit enemies afflicted with stasis, they take 100% of the hit damage again after a 1.5 second delay. And you can actually increase it to 120%. And this basically doubles your explosion damage when you inflict stasis. And fortunately, this is very easy to do. So we use the railgun for that, because there's a rune where you apply stasis with a 100% chance. So basically what you want to do is you want to mark something, then you want to start the DPS, and then before the pop you inflict a stasis to get every explosion effect twice, basically. The other runes on this are just like support stuff, grind rage, reduce cost, etc. This is pretty pointless here. One thing about the raygun is though that you can choose to also apply freeze or lightning elements. So if you have a high amount of physical damage on your build, then you can convert the physical to frost or physical to lightning if you uncheck this rune, and you can apply more elements of this. So this is quite nice. I chose to use the frost because on the very high tiers, when I had big pools with like 100 monsters, the shock would actually crash my game, and I just hope that this is gonna get fixed, because it would actually be preferable to the freeze. But the freeze is also quite nice. Other than that, we have some DPS skills, raining arrows. This is just used to apply bleeds and poison everywhere, basically. It's like an AoE skill. Looks like this. And we don't really care too much about the damage of this. We just want to apply bleeds everywhere. So we have cooldown reduction. We have a little bit of damage, a little bit of cost reduction, slow. So it's just like, AoE and a little bit of support, basically. We have Dust Crowd. This is actually a very important skill, because we use this for positioning. So at the start of a pull, you use this to walk into the pull, and you can apply the mark to a target very safely, because it doesn't break the invisibility when you use the Mark of Impurity. So this is really great. And you can move through enemies. I also chose cursed stacks, duration, cost, and cooldown, and movement speed. So this is just like a nice mobility skill. You can use it to escape from dangerous situations, and as I said, like at the start of the pull, you can always run into a pack, and that's pretty nice. Other than that, for single target, and also for like some additional DPS, I have the turrets. They're all right. They're like an easy way to apply your bleed and poison, basically. So I just made it so I have 2 turrets, a little bit of damage, and they can rotate, so they can follow the boss around, basically. Yeah. Other than that, this is about it for the skills. You can use a 5th skill slot. For example, Phantom Blades would be like a decent DPS boost here and there, but it's not really that crazy. I tried Gunslinger a bit. There's actually a rune where you deal more damage per ailment on a target, and I'm stacking something like 100 ailments or more, and it still doesn't really seem great. So yeah, this is just like a little bit of extra damage, but it's very hard to even notice the difference sometimes when I have like 100 ailments on a target. I'm not really sure why this is, but it just seems like it's not really doing that much. But you can use it as a 5th skill if you want. I just feel like it's very clunky, and I rather rely on the explosions and the pulls, basically. So this is the passive tree here. Basically, you want to start out in the purple area. We want to get the status ailment chance, and since we use poison and bleed, we want the material status ailment chance, and we're also scaling a lot of material damage, bleed damage, toxic damage, and so on. So keep that in mind. And if you want to start playing this build at level 0, which you can do, then you should probably rotate this ring around, because the Kabbalist area is the core of the build basically. So you want to reach that first, because here's like all the ailment stuff for the bleed and the poison. So the core here really is the +5 ailment stacks that you can get twice here. Then we have the chance to multiply the number of ailment stacks inflicted by 2. This is actually 100%, so you always multiply it by 2. And we have +2 ailment stacks inflicted. So like this, you stack your poisons and your bleeds really, really fast. With just a few attacks, you have like maximum stacks, and they will start bleeding. And this is really good DPS, or even early on in the campaign, even before you have, a lot of material damage and so on. And this is very strong. And then, later, once you're like level 30 or so, you can probably reset your tree and then rotate it to this setup. So you can, take the other pathing just like you're supposed to. So basically with this tree now, you would path out from the purple area into the Warmonger. So you go to the Leech, and then you can take the Branded Burst. Branded Burst is extremely strong. It's a nice damage reduction buff. Basically, you have 100% damage reduction, and every time you get hit, you lose 20% of that. This is very, very strong, and like basically every few seconds you gain like 1 stack of this damage reduction again. So this is nice. Another really important area is the Time Weaver. So you want to path over here next, probably, because of the which time cannot heal. As I mentioned earlier with the railgun, you double up on the explosions. This is really nice. It doesn't work for the dots, but it does work for the hit damage. So you don't double the dots, but the waiting arrow hits, the turret hits. It's still a little bit of DPS, and of course the big explosions. And also there's more ailment stacks here. So we have another +10 ailment stacks, so we can have 30 bleed and poison stacks, and this is also quite a significant DPS boost. Another really nice toughness node as well is the Dire Juncture here. Basically it sets your maximum HP to 90%, but you take damage from hits in 2 turns basically. So you take 40% first, and then after 1 second you take 60%. So this really is a nice way to prevent one-shots. And it's really nice, to give you some time to react to incoming damage, to start leeching, or to pop your health potions or something. Other than that, we have like some generic DPS increases here. We have rage generation on kill. This is relatively nice. The Bestial Frenzy is actually a very nice node here. It's even worth taking the small one, because this seems to be one of the very few multipliers on this tree. The problem with this build really is that there's a lot of conditional damage boosts, like damage per nearby enemy, or damage to a single enemy that doesn't have any targets around, and the damage increased when you're far away from all enemies. But all of these are just additive bonuses, and you have to see that these conditional effects with additive bonuses are extremely weak, because it's very hard to enable these effects, but they just give you the same damage buff as some small node like the 50% medieval damage here, for example. So I hope they're gonna fix this eventually and make them actually multiplicative, because there's no point in having those be additive. You have something like, I don't know, maybe 500, 600, 800% additive damage. So adding like 15% doesn't really do much. And you have a node like this, for example, that I just took. Here it says deal more damage when only one nearby enemy. When you have only one nearby enemy. It's actually just additive damage. So this is almost pointless. This is like really like a big disadvantage of this entire tree, and by tier 190 it's also so hard, I guess. But anyway, after you finish this top cluster, you have basically the core of the build completed, and then you can just take like a lot of additional stuff, extra damage, extra survivability. It doesn't really matter too much. But one good thing that is really nice is the Child of Fury, Furious Appetite, which gives you a lot of rage and rage regen. This is really great, and I would really recommend picking this up, because it really makes everything much smoother. You don't have to regenerate rage a lot, you don't have to use rage potions. I use double health potions, and it works really well. But after this you should be something around level 40 or so, and then or maybe level 50, and then you can basically do whatever you would like. So for me, this is pathing over to the left from there. So I picked up the active dodge can go for enemies. This is really nice because it makes making the pulls very, very easy since you have much more mobility. I pick up the stamina regeneration rate, is quite nice. And then I went over here to some block chance and the weakness. So basically every time I block, I apply weakness to targets around me, which makes them deal less damage. So this makes me more tanky. It's quite nice. I'm not really stacking a lot of block chance. I have like 20% block chance or so, but it still helps a little bit. And we have the Undertaker here. So Undertaker drops like a globe when you kill something, and picking out this globe gives you like a 30% extra damage as poison for 5 seconds. So it's just like, you know, something to help you out on the clear. And sometimes you kill a lot of targets and get a lot of these globes. So it's a nice damage boost in that case. But you don't really need this. You can also choose to stack other things. For example, you can go down here to the block nodes as well. They are actually pathing here right now. So when you stack a little bit of block chance, you can take these nodes. So it's a nice damage boost. There's also like some other block behind it. Here's also something that gives you like health regen, etc. Depending on like what kind of armor you're wearing. It's like auto siege breaker area basically. This is pretty good. Also really nice is the sentinel area. There's like the starting green stuff. You have like dodge chance when you get hit, stamina points, attack speed. Yeah, it's like it helps out a little bit. So you can also, you know, take some points here. But yeah, there's like a lot of options, but it's also mainly because a lot of stuff doesn't work. So if the passivity was actually working, you would take this node here. It's called Primordial Insights. It's also in the Kabbalist area. This is very, very strong. But unfortunately, it doesn't work. So it says damage over time generated with a critical hit deals critical damage, and this was initially like the the core scaling mechanism of my build. But I realized it actually is broken and doesn't do anything. So you can easily double or even triple your DPS by having like really nice crit chance, crit damage, and just endgame gear where you have all the stats you want, and you would deal insane dot DPS. And once this is fixed, you would have to change this tree around a little bit. You probably want to pick up, like the some crit stuff. You can also pick up, the attack speed on crit. There's like some crit nodes here, and you can stack a lot more ferocity, for example, crit damage, and you will do insane dot DPS. But right now, unfortunately, this doesn't work. Even though it's right there, it's at 1 point. It's very sad. But yeah, this is also why I mentioned at the start of the video that this build is basically just gonna get stronger. It's mostly because of this 1 point here, and potentially other fixes like making these nodes multiplicative damage instead of additive and so on. Yeah. Anyway, for the gear, you want to stack a few certain stats, especially like on some items, and other than that, it's just defense basically. So yeah, one thing I noticed is that transfer time reduction between willpower and rage is very, very strong. So you want to have this a little bit. I actually managed to roll this on my bow. So my bow looks like this. You need to make sure that your rend and your toxic damage are the 2 highest damage types on your build, or physical and toxic. The thing is that with the railgun, you convert the physical to lightning or to frost if you want to apply the other ailments. So your physical needs to be a little bit higher than rend. But basically, you need to make sure that those 2 are the highest, and then you can apply the bleed and the poison with everything. And you can still use the railgun to apply the other 2 ailments. So this is really nice. And the transit time reduction makes it so that when you use a skill, you don't lose that much time regening willpower. Instead, it just goes back to rage really fast. So I stacked this a bit. There's support gems for this actually on the rings, belt, and amulet. So I pulled some of these in, where you can also stack more of this transfer time reduction. And this makes it very smooth. Other than that, you want to stack cooldown and resource a lot as well. So I have quite a few items with cost reduction and cooldown. And this also really helps out on the build. To use more Dusk Shroud, apply Mark more easily, use more Wailing Arrows, and so on. So the cost reduction and the cooldown reduction are very important here, and you should definitely stack those. Other than that, you don't really want attack speed, you don't really want crit and so on right now, at least until the node is fixed. So for example, I have like ferocity here, which is really useless. You want to stack a little bit of wisdom. It's nice to have a certain amount of proc chance on your bleeds. For me, this is around 23%. On lower end content, you probably want a little bit more, so you want to invest more into wisdom at lower end content. I have everything in toughness right now on the high tiers, simply because the fights are so long, I will easily apply my elements anyway. I think something like 30% proc chance is quite comfortable with this, and you don't really need much more. So maybe like early on when you do like faster runs, 40% is also fine, but you can definitely reduce it as you go higher in tiers. Yeah, the other stats are just like toughness and wisdom, so you want to stack those a bit. Try to get life and auras on your items, and that's about it. There's also like these untainted items. Basically, you get them when you do these special runs with untainted. I managed to get like a ring with +2 ailment stacks inflicted and a belt with +1. I think having like a ring is pretty nice with +2. The belt, I'll probably replace this very soon. You don't really need it, but it does help to apply stuff a little bit. Yeah. Other than that, movement speed is also quite important. You want to stack maybe like 30, 40, 50% movement speed just for smoother kiting and positioning. This really helps, and this is about it. If you can, try to stack some material damage like this. Yeah, but right now there's not really many scaling mechanisms, so you can actually do most of the content with like very low end gear, and most of it is just to increase how easy it is to play this, by having more toughness, by having more cooldown on a resource, but it doesn't really improve the DPS all that much. It just makes everything, much more like smooth to play. And that's it for this guide. Hope you liked it, and hope you will enjoy the build just as much as I do. I really like playing this. It's a lot of fun, going higher and higher, and having these like super big explosions. There's also like one thing to note when you do maps. Basically, there's certain map modifiers that are really nice for this build. Most importantly, you want to stack enemy movement speed, and you want to stack underling maximum HP. And there's also one modifier saying that enemies have a chance to spawn weak enemies when they die, or something like that. So this obviously is really nice because you can kill small trash and basically spawn more trash. And that will be very easy to blow up, bosses and elites. And it just makes the runs actually easier instead of harder when you have this extra HP and extra monsters. So this is very nice. Keep an eye out for that when you add modifiers to your maps. And other than that, I also noticed that elites are not really worth anything. They don't really drop much, and if you can't blow them up, then don't bother fighting them for like 5 minutes. Just skip them or kite them, and maybe you get lucky to explode them somewhere. Otherwise, just leave them, or kite them to the boss, and maybe eventually you can use the elite to blow up the boss or something like that. So this is some strats you can do. Another cool thing is also these so-called hornstones. So on some maps you will find these hornstones. They spawn like an infinite amount of monsters, up to like a certain number, and when you kill them, they spawn more. And basically you want to not destroy them. You want to use them, in case you're not able to kill a boss, you can just kite the boss there, and then usually you can do like a chain reaction to finish him there. So this is like a nice bonus when you find them. Always keep them alive, and then go to the boss, and worst case, drag the boss there. Also, when you're clearing high tiers, try to make sure that you really clean most of the corners, clean all the side areas. You want to do as much progression as possible at the start of the map and not at the end, because you want to have the enemies that are close to the boss. You want some trash for the boss basically. So you want to keep that alive and not kill something that's really close there, because you want to use it for the boss. Yeah. Other than that, when I do the 190, I will upload a video as well, like of the full run probably. So you should see that. It's going to be like my first 190 sometime tonight probably. I'm quite excited, to finally beat the highest tier, and then probably farm a couple of 190s as well. And so I get a lot of questions also about why I'm using a bow, and the reason is there is no point, you know, from a gameplay perspective to use a bow. It just looks awesome. I like bows. I'm gonna use bows. And you know, there's definitely much better builds you can do with pistols, because pistols are simply superior in every way. And yeah, you know, eventually I'm also gonna switch to pistol when I have done the 190. But for now, this was kind of my goal, to, you know, do a bow build until the highest tier, and I'm doing exactly that. And after that, you know, you can use like a pistol with a shield, you can use a pistol with a catalyst, or a melee weapon. I'm actually quite excited to try melee weapon plus pistol, because you can use a melee skill as the 5th skill. And this one is going to be the hook, so I can actually hook stuff, basically like a support barb in D3. I think that's going to be great, you know, to make bigger explosions, and we'll see how that goes. Yeah. Anyway, hope you like this, and I see you guys next time.